Welcome to the It's Our Life's Work podcast, brought to you by Opus Vitae Construction here in Portland, Oregon.
All right. We are here with a very special guest from out of state, Mr. Kristof Irwin, somewhat of a celebrity in the high-performance building and building science world.
You're a celebrity.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, you are to us, and that's all that matters.
Okay,
right?
that's good.
Yeah. So, Kristof, I wanted to start off with, you introduce yourself a little bit, who you are, what you do, and then we'll share a little story about how we came to know you.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting. You may not even know this, but
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I would know that we did a project together in Portland, but
yeah. So yeah, it's before that.
okay. So I'm Kristof Irwin, and my career has culminated with me arriving at this podcast table. And I arrived here through working with some fantastic people at Positive Energy. And we have done a great variety of things over the years, all on the theme of building science, which is the sciences applied to buildings. And that means, of course, the physical sciences like thermodynamics and fluid dynamics. Biology is a big one now. And, it goes on and on, right? There's the geological sciences and moisture and materials. I think what we're doing together today is an example of the social sciences applied to buildings. They can be so much more than they are. And generally speaking, most people live in one and don't realize what it can be. Yeah.
So, but like the nuts and bolts, do you have a?
Oh, you want me to say like who I am, what I do,
Yeah.
that kind of thing?
Yeah. What
Okay, so yeah, I guess I'm the principal and founder of Positive Energy. My wife is also one of those. And we're about 20 people.
Did she outrank you?
Yeah,
Okay.
51, 49%. We're the only owners. Yeah, and so we do MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing design, enclosure consulting, and building science consulting. So that's what we've done. We've done lots of things over the years. We've been in the this is too important, there must be a business model around here somewhere category for quite a while. Yeah, so thank you for reminding me to actually formally introduce what I do. So anyone listening, we would love to design your mechanical system. We would love to help you with resilient energy and water systems. We would love to help you recognize how much more you can expect from where you live.
Yeah, and because of what it is that you do, you can work in Portland, even though you're based out of Austin, Texas.
Yeah, basic principles are we need to understand the climate and we need to understand the enclosure, and then we can, and importantly, we need to understand the client's goals, and then we can do our magic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So, Kristof, this thing came around full circle without you knowing it, in the sense that some years ago when Kevin and I were working together and we were considering how to continue to do things better, because it was driving us crazy to see things done the same poor ways that we'd seen them done in the past. And we were, Kevin was already a fair ways down the kind of building a science road from better practices that he'd put into place over his career. But I was listening to a podcast from a company in Austin, Texas, and started listening to episode after episode of your podcast, and then had the audacity to email and then call Miguel and then talk to Miguel several times on the phone, which led to a relationship that led to a project that led to you be at this table.
Oh, so it started with podcasts.
So it started with your podcast.
It did.
Here we are.
And the other piece of that story is my story. And so Paul says to me, Kevin, listen to this podcast. It's a building science podcast. And at the time, my eyes probably rolled back in my head a little bit just because there's lots of them out there, right? But he's like, Kevin, really listen. There's something special there. And so I listened, and I don't remember what episode it was, but you were talking about HVAC systems and the absurdity of like how the new cars have the driver and passenger can set their own temperature, even though they're like, 6 inches away from each other. But you were also talking about just like, shouldn't we be expecting better? And that we would be using technology that's current instead of something from back in the 60s still. And you explained it and the cadence of your voice and all those things. And I was like, this dude's special. So I remember saying to Paul, I'm like, yeah, like that was excellent. This is great. And it just resonated for me. And it was like you were putting into words the things that I was thinking, but didn't have the ability to put into words, I guess. And so that's, how we kind of decided that we wanted to pursue a relationship with you guys, because we were, like-minded.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would have said. And not just like-minded, but like-hearted, right? Like human caring is such a powerful force. It's underappreciated.
Yeah.
I think that there are podcasts that's kind of worthy of your eyes. Like it's rolling back, right? It's kind of discursive thought writ large. And, we say overtly we're in the information age. And T.S. Eliot has that fantastic quote, like, where is the knowledge lost in information? And then even more deeply, where is the wisdom lost in knowledge? And so, if we're just out here trafficking in facts, the grains of moisture in this room are 62 grains per pound, right? Like, how is that relevant? Right? That is important to do a design, but it's not going to convince you.
Yeah, no, it's not. And the thing that we struggle with a lot is it's easy to use vernacular and technical jargon that we know what it means, but when we're talking to clients, they don't. Or it might mean something very different to them. And so we struggle with that one a lot.
Yeah, human comfort, right? We know the ASHRAE definition. That ASHRAE is a group of engineers. It is subjective, right? They say it is that state of mind, right? Engineers don't use that phrase lightly. And I'm blanking on the right. It's like that. It basically correlates with satisfaction with the thermal qualities of the indoor environment, something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Expresses satisfaction. That state of mind which expresses satisfaction with right? Oh, great. Let me do the math on what Kevin's mind will find satisfaction with.
Or even that between like my wife and I, because she has a very different idea of what comfort is than I do. Or like your children or your grandparent. Like, my father-in-law is at 78 degrees, he's freezing.
Whoa.
Wow.
But then at like 85 degrees, he's sweating. He's too hot. So it's like for him, that sweet spot of comfort is very different than what it is for me.
Yeah.
Or what it is for, like my 3-year-old grandson who like is never cold. Right. So, the whole comfort thing is a tough one. It really is.
Kristof, one of the things that has drawn us to you from the beginning in our conversations is we sort of joke with people, but it's not a joke, really. It's that we're a construction company who are actually more in the people business than we are in construction, because that part of it weighs so heavy on how we do what we do. And I think even on your website at one point you had something like design around people and a good building will follow, or something like that.
Still on my email tagline.
It is? Yeah. And that sort of affinity for caring about the people first and designing a good building as a result of those people is really right at the heart of what we're trying to do. And that's a interesting and tough mix.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh.
Can I elaborate a little?
Yeah, please.
On that? Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately what we're giving to our clients is an emotional experience, right? Satisfaction, happiness, right? Expresses satisfaction with the indoor environment. And we think of that, we got a thermostat on the wall, like pshaw, right? We are covered with tens of thousands of thermal sensors, but we also are picking up sounds, odors, qualities of light, subtle vibrations, right? And they all kind of go together to go into our emotional, like let's call it our emotional processing system. And these are the sensors that our bodies pick up, right? The mammal in us picks up.
Right.
And it's something like 1/50,000th to 1/500,000th of what our bodies pick up makes it to our conscious mind and says, I know what's wrong with this room. It's the windows, or it's the color of the couch, right? Who knows what it really was, but it gets all kind of computed together, bubbles up, and we say, satisfaction, yes or no, right?
Yeah.
And that could branch off so many different ways. Right there.
And it does.
Yeah, just very briefly. So one of the directions that it goes that's emerging right now is this thing about the indoor microbiome and the human microbiome, right? So this thing we call Kevin here, and don't trivialize this, listeners. This thing we call Kevin here is 1 trillion living beings living as a symbiosis, right? Kevin, you're a planet.
Right.
You have multiple ecosystems, right? And of living creatures on your skin. But what's wild is that those living creatures that we call you are really affected by what's on the surrounding surfaces and what's in the air around us. Mm-hmm. Western science is learning this. They're recognizing that the indoor microbiome and the human microbiome are kind of functioning in concert, and that it's like a master regulatory organ that affects our physical, mental, and emotional health. And, sorry to say, listeners, one that we currently don't really know much about. Right. Like, we know probiotics for buildings are coming. There's some microbes that we think are generally beneficial. But right now we just know, hey, y'all, it's way more complex than a thermostat on the wall.
Right. Yeah. But even the one that you can set with your phone?
Yeah, even that one, even multi-zones. And if I could just go back to the human thing just briefly, this is like personal, right? So I've talked to other engineers about going into the residential space, other MEP firms, and they recognize it as fraught. They recognize it as taking a lot of bravery, a lot of courage to enter, because, and same thing what you guys do, right? And let's just unpack the word courage, right? Like, if you're not feeling fear, you can't display courage, right? And what you're feeling afraid of is that, like, so we're engineers and we comment on the enclosure, and, maybe do some design drawings on that, and we design the mechanical systems. That's the design. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the finger pointing at the moon. The client does not live in our design. Right. And then some enclosure gets built that hopefully has a lot of resemblance to what we thought was going to be built. Mm-hmm. And then some mechanical system gets built that hopefully has some, right? So, but if a comfort complaint comes, the first thing is like, the design is wrong. Right. Because why? Chances are good someone hired positive energy because it was so important to them that nothing go wrong. Mm-hmm. And so now they say, hey, we paid, quote, extra, which I would push back on and say there always should be a design. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't just be you come in, scratch your head, and figure it out, and, especially with mechanicals. But yeah, so the point is that, we've been doing this 17, 18 years now, and we have a handful of comfort complaints out of hundreds and hundreds of designs. And yet when they come in, they always come in hot, and they always come in like guilty until proven innocent. Right? So it's hard. The psychology of it's hard. I'm generally a pleaser persona. I want people to be happy, and I have to learn to hold my seat. And I guess in that weird way, I value the difficult exercises psychologically over the years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in this industry, yours and ours, you can't not have that, right? Because it's all emotion.
Yeah.
We're dealing with people's money. We're
dealing
with their shelter, their castle, all those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very emotional. Mm-hmm. Very. Yeah,
one subtle thing I've learned about recently. This was from the researchers at UC Berkeley, Gail Brager and her group. Are how shelter is experienced by our bodies is strongly dependent on stable surface temperatures. Mm-hmm. Our bodies experience the thermal environment through surface temperatures around us, but more subtly, right? Like, you could go back again and say the mammal in us says, when those surface temperatures are relatively stable, the mammal in us recognizes that as a good shelter, and it feels safe. Hmm. So what causes thermal instability in surface temperatures, right? Lots of glass, right? So unfortunately, our egos, our personalities, they say, what makes me happy is relational signaling through my building, showing that I'm in this group of people, or, Anyway, so we have this slight dissonance, or maybe rather overt dissonance, between our personalities and our biology, our mammal.
For sure, yeah. We're complex that way. But, when you were talking about the microbiome, that is a huge thing. And it is, I believe, like, we're just starting to understand it, and the importance of it, and how it regulates so many
things. That is 100% true. We're just starting.
Yeah. And the same thing is happening, even though it's a little bit of a divergence, same thing is happening in the agricultural world, where they're understanding that the soil microbiome is critical to plant health, human health.
Exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. Earth health, everything, right? And there's this big push to realize the benefit of eating locally and seasonally, because the microbiome in which you live and the ground in which, like,
phytonutrients in the food.
Thing, it creates this like perfectly closed loop. And our houses are part of that. And so when we sterilize them, and we use lots of chemicals, and paints have, like antimicrobials put into them and all that stuff, we're altering that natural microbiome and in fact pointing it towards the other side.
Yep.
Because now the really ugly, mean, strong molds and stuff that can live through the stuff that we're putting in there are wreaking a lot of havoc, and that balance is like gone and shifted in one way. And that's the thing that I think that we can recognize now, is that balance is critical in all things.
Here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And even just, we've come to realize how much of a part mold and mycotoxins play in healthy environments or unhealthy environments. But as we start to want to test for them, we realize just how many of them there are out there, and that we don't even have testing methods for more than a handful of them. And so it's a very complex environment we're working in.
You bring up mold, and it's like a 6-hour monologue kind of gets installed back on my mouth, and I won't go there. I actually want to go back to what Kevin said about this balance, and let's just not speak completely factually, but let's say in the 1950s we decided we're badasses. Nature is a machine. We can figure out how to hack it and get what we want out of it, right? So, you've got the Bonneville Dam out here. You've got all the fish hatcheries, right? Because we wiped out the salmon, and now we, manufacture them and put them back into the ecosystem. And furthermore, we say we are a machine, right? And we're just a chemical machine. We are not. Both nature and us, and the interaction of nature and us, it is a tremendously complex ecosystem with emergent behaviors that no one could predict.
Right.
Like, we need so much more humility than we apply, generally speaking, when we interact in the world. And that's why I said, don't trivialize 1 trillion living beings. There's about 8 billion living beings on the planet, I think, maybe 14. I don't know, one of those numbers. Right? So trillion, each one of us, right? So, and then what you said about, us living in nature. So first of all, I am an ecosystem. I am a planet, right? The two of you are. We shook hands a few minutes ago. We've just exchanged ecosystems, right? Tremendous complexity. It could be generally beneficial, right? They say that people that live alone, it starts to affect their cognition and their emotions, like Kaczynski or whatever, the Oklahoma City bomber guy, right? He lived alone in the woods, and he just got all crazy making. So we're social mammals. We need social interaction. Yes. And I think that's a really important part when you talk about the human factor in buildings, and we're in the people business. Yeah. And I could talk mold a little if you want, or we can.
No, we might double back to it.
It's very impactful. It's
Yeah, it is.
It makes you allergic to everything. There you go.
Right, but at the same time, I mean, feel free to if you want to talk about mold a little bit, feel free to just riff a little bit, because I think that we don't know what's in your head, and I think that a lot of what's in your head is very valuable for people.
Yeah, well, I just tip of the iceberg, right? We require fungal ecosystems to survive, right? The forest floor would not be what it is.
Right.
Agriculture wouldn't be what it is. Similarly, in our bodies, right? We require fungal systems, and there's a balance in there. And when things get out of balance, they're tremendously impactful, right? Like, it can impact our immune system, our inflammatory systems, right? And those are huge, right? It can affect our endocrine system, sleep, mood, appetite, sexual function. All these things can be impacted, and it becomes so complex, it's really hard to understand where it comes from. And so I think that the core understanding of mold is that it's like you want to say, we call ourselves the dominant life form.
Right.
Well, this little simple thing, these fungal species, they affect us profoundly and deeply, even our behavior, right? And I'm not talking about the zombie ants. And just one going toward a more specific fact, mold has in its cell walls a molecule. It's called a beta-glucan that it's associated with moldy food, that we have receptors in our lungs that when we get exposed to beta-glucans, it just triggers a cascade of J. David Miller is one of my, I'm starstruck with him. He's a researcher. He calls it a very unfortunate cascade, or something like an unhappy cascade. And so there is this thing, our bodies are saying, well, we better watch out for moldy food. And there's this inflammatory responses, immune responses can get triggered very directly. Mycotoxins are, they're actually finding out a lot of things attributed to mycotoxins might actually be this dectin receptor, and so right, it's actually similar to the microbiome, right? It's like a kaleidoscope of information. And one last thing to help us understand us as professionals trying to deliver a healthy indoor environment to people, right? Oh my gosh, that's fraught right now, because what's happening is, in the background of us saying, here, Mr. or Mrs. Homeowner, we're going to do this for you. It's a good thing. What we're doing is we have these things called proton transfer reaction time of flight mass spectrometers. Huge mouthful.
Wow.
And then we have next generation genetic sequencing. It's PTR, TOFMS, right? They call them sniffers. So we have these sniffers, and we have these things that can replicate DNA in the environment and RNA in the environment. And you put those two together, and you get mountains of data, tremendous needle in the haystack puzzles. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, right, Google and Amazon have helped us say, oh, give me mountains of data. I'll find some signals in that. And, so what's happening is we are in the midst of a revolution in the understanding of indoor air quality, right now. So, what we can do, like floating around in this sea of like, oh my God, what do we do? You find things to anchor to, and they are like the 5 principles of indoor air quality. You start with a good enclosure, minimize indoor emissions of pollutants, keep it dry, filter, and ventilate, right? So, those are always good.
Yeah.
And complicated, right? Start with a good enclosure. Let's talk about that for 12 hours.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing
Indoor
about
pollutants.
indoor air quality, though, that I think that a lot of people miss is that, like as a building biologist or a building scientist, whatever, we can create a very natural, healthy indoor environment. But the second that we leave that building, all bets are off, because one piece of IKEA furniture, boom.
Cleaning products, personal care products,
right?
Cosmetics,
candles.
Yep, candles.
My wife hates it when I say it, but it's like candles are toxic. Like all that pollutant goes into the air and we're breathing it.
Right. It's not for sure that your wife has a toxic response to the candle, but candles do produce toxins.
They do, but see, for me, I get a headache just like that.
Wow.
As soon as that fake fragrance comes into me, it's almost instant.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so it's like it's all those things that people do, or they bring in like let's say like new furniture that has formaldehyde in it, or has been sprayed with the chemicals so that they don't catch fire and stuff like that, and all that stuff off gases into the space, and people don't realize how much they can impact that to a negative beyond just the building itself. So it's kind of a bit of a two-person or two entities have to sort of work together to keep that indoor air quality clean.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. You triggered something. I think it's important. You mentioned biobiology, and so biobiology. So we talked about the buildings, the sciences applied to buildings, and how what they started out is, if you want to call classic building science, it was rain, air, vapor, thermal, and it was thermodynamics and moisture and materials, and at some point we said, oh look, there's tremendous overlap between the health sciences and the building sciences. Well, biobiology generally went there first, and so these people, these practitioners in biobiology, they're probably there because they or someone they know had an intensely personal experience of a negative reaction to the way we build generally.
Yes.
And and I've had this as a building science consultant, like people whose hands clench up when they go home, or whose kids can't be in the house, or whose parents can't be in the house, or whose kids, after a rainstorm, the crawl space gets wet and they're in the ER and they're calling me, can you come to my house right now? And we need to understand it, right? So what I mean is like, whoosh, like a flame of emotion coming over me. And like those of us that are in the industry that are on this front line, it's not a Gedanken experiment. This stuff is real. People get sick from homes. Now, not everyone does.
Right.
So it's almost like you would say, unfortunately, not everyone gets sick from the same things. Because if they did, we'd like, oh, that's what it is. Let's not do that. But one of the points I wanted to make about the mold, right? So, and there is something we know about the indoor microbiome that is causative, or at least associated with health, and it is that a diverse indoor microbiome, or a diverse microbiome, right? We called nature our old friends biome, right? The farm-like biome, which is why dogs are good in the house, right? So we want diversity. What we've done as a race of living beings is we've said, oh, we'll surround ourselves with concrete, sheetrock, latex paint, which keep in mind that's petrochemical, right? And so what we've done is, and on and on and on, glass, steel, we've down selected to the species that can live on those surfaces. And it just so happens, I don't know if it's a coincidence or like a perverse irony, that the molds that grow on those surfaces, the artificial materials that we select, they are the ones that are really negatively impacting our health. So people like Paula Baker Laporte will say, oh, you want a healthy home? Well, that's easy, quote unquote, or in italics. That's easy. Natural materials in their unadulterated state. Yeah. Right? So yeah, we got a beautiful wood table and you put varnish and shellac and paint on it, right? Okay, that's pretty adulterated, right? So what we're finding out is like, that's what the biobiologists have been shouting from the mountaintops for years. And many people are saying, oh, they're kind of the fringe and they're a little crazy. And, you know, and to be fair, some of them are rather dogmatic, right? Because they've been ignored and they know there's truth there. You try the psychology of that, knowing you're speaking the truth and society is rolling their eyes at you, right? So yeah, I was marinated in that psychology for a while. So, but my point is that things are starting to converge now, right? And yet, like you two, you're on the front line of telling someone, like, how do you tell someone, we would like to give you an environment surrounded by natural materials in their unadulterated state? No one does that. Where are you going to buy that? What contractors, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we get a lot is that people don't believe that it's important.
Right. Because and that's their cognition, their egos.
It is. And it's also like, well, I've been living in this house for all these years and we're fine. Or a lot of people will be like, well, my grandparents' house was fine. And it's like, maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Like, did you live there or did you just visit? Did your grandparents have chronic illnesses? I bet they did. Could it be traced back to that? Maybe.
Right.
Or maybe their house was, built pre-war and very, very leaky and very,
the building stayed dry.
Exactly. Right. Gets wet, dries out, all those things. I mean, there's so many components to that. And I think it's a little bit interesting that we take such a laissez-faire approach. Like, oh, well, that's fine. I don't know anybody that's died from a house, or I don't know anybody that their house has made them sick. And they actually probably do know people that their house has made them sick. They just don't know it.
Correct.
Right? I mean, that's...
Do allergists say you should have your house tested for mold? Probably not.
Yeah.
They say, here's some medication.
Yeah. Exactly right.
Off you go.
Yep.
Yeah. It's an ecosystem of ideas that's missing a chunk.
It is, for sure. Yeah. But it's hard though when you're swimming against that current, because what you're saying is contrary to what everybody else around them is saying.
And I have builders, not you guys, and it's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to denigrate these builders that say, just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And they're usually the ones saying, tell me spray foam's okay, because I've been using that for a long time. Because it's easy. It makes things easy, right? And unfortunately, easy isn't what we optimize for, right? Like we come back to the beginning. We are in the business of delivering satisfaction through indoor environments to clients. And we are complex. Indoor environments are complex. That means that answer is implicitly and always will be complex.
Right.
It's complex in the ways we've been talking about from the science. Like, we hardly understand the beginning of what we're talking about here. And then it gets even more complex because the person that we're trying to deliver the project for also has things like dollars in their bank account that imply things for how we can build. So let's say we had all the dollars in the world. We wanted to build the best thing we could. We're already working with somewhat limited set of understanding in those areas. And even if we applied our very, very best efforts, we wouldn't make it perfect. But then we run into the fact that there's also dollars involved and people's other values. And we've talked about this outside the podcast, where we're, and you also are trying to run a company, and we're also trying to follow a set of moral principles when it comes to people. How have you done that over your career, or what has that journey been like, trying to make money while upholding these values?
That's a very direct question. I can tell you that I don't think, well, it's a tough answer because I don't know how much I want to divulge, right? Publicly. Yeah. I would just say that generally speaking, my wife and I know deep down that what we offer to society is of value, right? It's like when we started as offering building science consulting, the only other building science consulting around, and this is a big, Austin, Texas is a big town, were older, retired white guys that had learned it in their jobs and now offered it on the side when they were available and not, out playing golf or whatever. And so we're like, well, this is too valuable of a service. Why can't there be a business model that offers it full time? So generally speaking, we have accepted to live to fight another month, right? And we have said yes to everything, anything, even if it's like, you'll pay me $300 to come to a, blower door and duct leakage and assess your home for mold, and it took me 14 hours, right? And then you want me to talk to you and debrief you and then talk to your contractors for the rest of the year.
Right.
And it's just like, clearly it's not it's not delivering the economic value, and yet it does deliver something like the heart value. It delivers like, this was important. And we've gotten emails and letters from clients that have made me cry because their kids aren't on inhalers anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And they're so grateful. And, we walked in and said immediately, oh my gosh, you need to seal from your garage. You're pulling air from your garage. Meanwhile, and this is not denigrating installing contractors at all, right? It's just their understanding was not systems of systems of systems. They're like, oh, you're having bad air quality issues. Let's put better filters between your house and the return, causing the return to pull more from the garage.
Right.
Then another installing contractor came in and gave them a new indoor air handler. Another one gave them a new outdoor unit. I don't know how that was specified. Maybe it wasn't cold enough. It wasn't dehumidifying. But like, we walk in and it, like, literally within 5 minutes, it's like, let's put a flashlight in the return and go into your garage with the lights out. Do you see that light? That's something you shouldn't see. Right. And the homeowner just gets it. But so the short answer, Paul, is we're sort of like, what's it called when a philanthropist? You don't have to be affluent to be a philanthropist. You can just say, what I do is of value to me. And then the other thing we do is, that's probably unusual, is, and this is again sort of personal, we pay our staff really well. We have some amazing, talented people that implicitly down select for, they also know that this is swimming upstream. They also know resolutely this is of value and hard is okay. And we pay them really well. We pay ourselves less well. We pay ourselves like, let's try to get by. So I guess that's about
Thank you for
more than I thought I would divulge.
that way. I mean, it's even asking the question is taking us into a vulnerable space. Because we want to provide for ourselves and our families, and we also want to uphold the values that we're saying. And the more we understand the values that we're talking about, the more we realize we have ways to deliver those values. And it's a really difficult set of decisions all day, every day, throughout the year. And I don't think there's not a right answer that we're going to come to about how to deliver that at any given time. But I would say, without a doubt, as I look at your company, this having you here in this room, having you in this conversation, having you inform this conversation, you're way better here than not here, and so your company needs to stay in existence. And we feel the same about ours. So there are times that we make hard decisions where we realize we're not 100% in alignment with what we want to deliver, what we would prefer to deliver. And part of it's driven by choices that are not ours. We try to inform and open the conversation as much as possible so the client understands what it is that's at stake, and then we let them help guide those decisions. But it's a very, very difficult set of decisions.
I can I feel that when you say that. I really like, I don't just think through that. And I had something I wanted to say. What was it?
I'm sure it was very profound.
Well, it's gone. It'll come back if it needs to.
Yeah, exactly. But what Paul was saying, which I agree with, that we want to inform the client and let them make the decision up to a point, right? Because we're not going to let them make a decision that's, where their house is going to fall down because they didn't want to use structural. They didn't want to use like structural members to save money, right? We're not going to allow that to happen because we take a best practice approach. But we want to inform them and let them put in place, or let them spend where they want for their values that they hold.
Right.
And, we're big into like the wood insulated concrete form construction. I think that's
Fast wall.
Yeah, fast wall.
We had to say names, Duracell.
We totally can. Nobody pays us for any of that stuff, but we find that to be a great building system for here. But we know that not every client is going to find value in that. And so our approach is to let them know that is a possibility and available to them. But if they want to do a traditional, 2x6 stud wall, that's great, but it just needs to look like this so it can perform well, and let them make the decision. And I think that that's an important thing, because we're giving them information and we're arming them with knowledge that we bring to the table from our years of experience, and say, now make a good decision based on that, as opposed to saying, well, no, this is the only way it's done every time, and that's all you get. Because like, it's their money and it's their house, and they need to be able to weigh in and choose. But I think the other thing that gets missed a lot is that people assume that somebody is going to build them something that's healthy and good.
Right.
Because there's this assumption, well, the city's inspecting it, and they reviewed the plans, and like the government won't let any products be put out into for sale that are bad for you, and all of that stuff, and that somebody's thought through all those things. And so when I hire somebody to build a house, I'm going to get this like great thing that somebody's thought about health and indoor air quality and all that stuff, and we're all good.
Yeah, that assumption. Yeah.
Right. And the reality is that almost never happens.
Unfortunately, yeah, they call production builders and volume builder, for a reason, right? Most of the homes are going through them. And just to touch back, you led me back to my point, and my point was really that if deep down you know that society can have better from their homes, and you set your intention and your life's work to making that happen. No plug for the podcast.
Right.
There.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I mean it, like, let's not trivialize that. Like, really, we've set our life's work together to make this happen. Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to go to where the industry is and engage and touch it, right? And so what's happening there? Some disheartenment, some capitulation of our deeper values, because like, this is the situation, this is the starting point, and there's that famous idea, right? If you want to make a journey, you have to go to the starting point to make the journey. You got to be where you are to start. And so when it comes to the way society delivers homes to itself, the assumption that it's really a good home, right? Well, I think that comes out of this technology in my pocket right now, which is like, it's literally near the state of the art, and it's constantly being re-released as the state of the art. Whereas homes are more like, I'm going to use a Ford Pinto as a metaphor. I don't know if you guys know, but the Ford Pinto, it's reviled because it has, it's a rear end axle. It's gone now. It was in the 70s. It was a car that Ford decided to use to compete with the Japanese automakers. And I had friends that were mechanics growing up with these damn rice burners with their fuel injectors. It's crazy, right? And so what happened was Ford came out, wanted to compete, and they decided what we're going to do is compete on price. We're going to get this car to cost $2,000 or less. I think it was like $1,700 they wanted it to cost. And they couldn't figure out where to put the gas tank. Usually the gas tank is up above the rear axle and transaxle, and the suspension's there to protect it from injury. Well, they said, no, it actually costs $30 more per car to do that. Let's put it in the back behind the axle. And, well, we expect this many accidents, lawsuits, collisions, fatalities a year. And that would cost, let's say, $100 million a year. Whereas to change the production of these cars, $30 per car would cost $300 million. Okay, so we're not going to move the gas tank, right? So the decision was made not to move the gas tank, not based on human well-being, but based on this other thing that, unfortunately, deeply woven in our society, is this idea that money is well-being.
Right.
Right? Now, there is some correlation, possibly, but I've been in hundreds, like literally hundreds of homes where there's something like a McLaren in the driveway, and you open the mechanical closet and it came out of a production builder house. It's in there, right? So that assumption that money is well-being is not true. Now, money, shrewdly applied, and this gets back to your thing about you present the options to the client and let them decide. That's slippery, Kevin, right? Because at some point, like as an engineer, as delivering mechanical designs. When do I stop educating and advocating, right? And the hours it can take to do that is partly why the podcast exists.
Right.
So I don't have to do it over and over and over and go, here, listen to this episode. Because, right, like you bought a car. Actually, you have a Chevy truck? GMC. Oh, yeah. Similar, right?
Yeah.
And so you have brake lines in the truck, and the brake lines could have been rubber or they could have been braided metal, right? They're probably braided metal but did you get to choose, right? Did some GMC engineer say to you, Kevin, how would you like, and yet the duct board, flex duct, metal duct question often goes to the clients. It used to go to the clients, do you want a heat pump or a furnace, right? It was like, wait a minute. These are like broad societal questions that experts should weigh in on first, And so it's really slippery. You're nodding. You're both nodding.
It is slippery, right? It is.
When do you let them decide? How big a realm do you give them?
Right, exactly.
When we get into conversations, we had a conversation where we were trying to describe passive house in as simple terms as we could, okay? So it was already skimming the surface. And we were using the analogy that there was going to be computer modeling that was done in order to help figure out if our assemblies were safe for an end user. We got to the end of the whole presentation. We got to the end of the discussion. And at that point, one of these people piped in and said, so when you're building that model, what size is it? Is it like a scale model? And we're like, no. It's not it's not actually a model at all. It's computer modeling where we're representing mathematically what's going to happen. And they'd been sitting with that wrong concept the whole time, and it had distracted them from the whole point of what we were talking about.
Can you say that all over again? But now I'm going to remember
exactly. Well, that same thing happens to us so often when we're talking about any one detail of a house with clients where their mind travels off in a different place and they're on the wrong path, and they don't understand that they're not understanding the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And so the task that you're talking about trying to educate and inform while offering a service and trying to make money as a company, it's insane. It's wild because our words often fall flat. So for example, we have a FASWAL assembly in our office that we use to try to show trades what it looks like and how it might be executed.
Yeah, and potential clients.
And we realize even that model, even though
it's a physical model,
we have to do some rework on and do it again because it's still confusing people. So that's not even on the kind of on the moral question about how to do it. It's just the practical reality of being able to convey the knowledge that takes years to develop to someone who's going to consume it in a small amount of time and make a wise decision on it.
But also has a big financial stake in it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's always the trouble because the better product always costs more, but it's always compared against the lowest product.
Yeah.
Always. And I fight with that
one
constantly. It's like, these are two different things. Yes, that cost is different. Understand that.
Yeah.
But they don't. They want to think that they're exactly the same. And you're just ripping me off.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, back earlier in my career, I used to hear that a lot where they'd be like, my so-and-so gave me a bid for this and your bid is that. I mean, sounds like somebody's ripping me off. It's like, nobody's ripping you off. But did you realize that maybe you're getting two different things? And that maybe that lower price guy is probably not doing the same thing I am? Is that possible? Yeah, it's entirely possible. Most often the case. But people tend to go to this simplicity thing of, well, no, somebody's ripping me off. Nobody's ripping you off.
Yeah. So now we've got complexity and complexity, right? So you're dealing with someone's lack of trust.
Yeah.
Okay, where did that come from? It probably predated your meeting them.
Oh, for sure.
And, and furthermore, like this idea that things should be low first cost as the reference, as the basis, right? Like, or code, right? Code, it exists in our society as like the minimum level of safety, right? It started probably with structural code, Hammurabi, and then we had fire code and public sanitation code. And I fully believe we're going to go to health code in homes. And I think we should. We have it in commercial buildings and hospitals, things like that. We have requirements. But it's treated as a ceiling. You shouldn't build any better than code.
Right.
And it's supposed to be the floor. You're not supposed to build any worse than code, right? So yeah, it's tricky for us. People are like, why are you you get accused of gold plating it, right? Like, no. If you understood it the way we understand it, you would understand that that you're breathing all the time, and that making the space temperature what it is not, you're not done.
Right.
What about drying, filtering, and ventilating, right?
Yeah, I know it, but I mean, I get that it's easy for us to understand that, and we can't unknow what we know. But you take somebody that has no knowledge or experience of construction and then ask them to come into this world and understand what we're talking about. And that's a tough one.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul mentioned this values, right? So as humans, we have these sorts of like innate kind of ethical dimensions or value dimensions. Like one is like, I'm loyal to my group, right? So what if your group is builders, right? You be loyal to the group of builders. Of course you're going to want to do that. Well, guess what? That industry has evolved over time. So how do you stay loyal to the group and its practices, even though they're evolving over time? There's a conundrum there. And then there is so in-group loyalty, and then similar and woven right in there is adherence to tradition. Right? You know, on our podcast we use "Don't eat the red berries," right? Like, so some mama mammal or daddy mammal taught some baby mammal, don't eat those berries, right? Yeah. And didn't like say, well, eat the berry and now watch how sick you get, or maybe you die. But just like, we don't eat those. And so, like, deeply in us, I don't know why I keep coming back to this, like deep in us, like our native biology is adhere to tradition. And yet, as a society, I mean, we brought up energy code a minute ago, and it's energy code. It's not health code. So yeah, we decided as a society that energy matters. Why, right? We took saving energy or reducing energy use in a home as a proxy for well-being. Okay, well, there's a big jump. And why did we do that? Well, maybe because we were tired of, fighting to get our oil out from the sand in the Middle East or something, right? And here we are now focused on energy. And as you reduce energy use, well, let's just say it. Like, how do you reduce energy in a building? You make the big energy using systems run less. There you go. Profound, right? What are the big energy using systems? The ones that heat and cool, and the one that heats water, right? So the one that cools was also the one that dried. And here we are with better windows, better insulation, better air sealing, causing it to run less. So now you have moisture issues where you didn't used to, because you saved energy. So you do save energy, but now you impact mold, microbiome, microecology, turn the volume knob up, and we have all these health impacts. So no good deed goes unpunished, right? Kind of thing. Right. So yeah, I feel like that's the theme of our talk today. It's like, it's not simple.
No,
it's not simple, right? It's not. I mean, you think you take like a simple structure, like a teepee, for example, right? It doesn't hold up well to windstorms.
Right.
But for the most part, it kind of does okay.
Yeah. Natural materials in their unadulterated.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yes. But there's always that one area in which it doesn't, perform super well. And I think that's true with all things. And unintended consequence is a huge deal because we will solve for X, but then have Z, Y, and Q. Right.
And then what we pay attention to is also specific to each person's personality.
It is. And the marketing from industries, I mean, you talk R value, for example. We know that that's not the end all be all for how a wall assembly works best, but that's what people know, and lay people talk R value. And we now have to use R value a lot because that's what other people understand. And the bigger the number, the better. Not always the case.
Why don't you elaborate on that? Why is that?
Because too much can be a problem, or the amount of insulation in the wrong place can be a problem.
Right.
And it's situational, right? Different areas have different, geographical areas have different climatic conditions, and that impacts how much you put here and how much you put there. And so there's not a single answer that can be applied to all homes and you'll be fine.
Right.
And
if air can move through the insulation, even though it says R38 on it, it's not R38, right? So, but when it says R38, right?
Exactly.
So, the heat should say, wait, excuse me, I can't move through this material. It's got the word R38 imprinted on it.
Right, exactly.
That would be so convenient.
Right, or if it gets wet, it diminishes, right? I mean, all of those things, and like the convective loops and all those things that are, to try and explain that to somebody that's not in this industry, it is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to
You
understand.
know, you triggered something else that Paul was alluding to earlier, right? So, what we need to do is we need to find a shortcut. It would be nice to find a magic shortcut so that we could take our expertise and move it into the minds of our clients' decision-making process. Well, that exists. We're relational beings, human trust, human caring.
Yeah.
I have experienced, people say I'm really passionate about things, right? It's partly because I guess I'm really interested in this. But right now, like we're looking each other in the eyes, right? And there's micro expressions that some part of me is picking up, but not my, cognitive system.
Yeah.
And so human trust is that magic shortcut. You do something with your clients so that you begin to trust each other. And it essentially is, hey, I've dedicated my life to helping you have the best home you can. And that's a complicated situation. It's kind of like this, like you said, there's economics involved, there's visual spatial outcomes involved. And then there's all these things that unfortunately for you, client, are invisible, immaterial, intangible, but not unimpactful, right? They're very impactful as well.
Yeah. And the reality is, Kristof, that sometimes the trust building process is the formative thing that we're trying to do during pre-construction all the time. From the very first day, we're trying to build that trust. And also, even if we have developed that trust to a degree, there are times that clients will come to us and say, your markup was X%. And we perceive that your competitor's markup was X minus 2%, and that's the basis of our decision. And we just get to live with that.
Yeah.
I mean, in one way, and we're not going to stop the trust building exercise because we agree with you. In fact, we talked about that when you were interviewing us also, that there was this book that we started out that was about trust. And that's something we can't walk away from. And we just have to know that we feel good about putting that relational component into it, bringing all these years to bear, and that sometimes it's still not going to work the way we want it to. That's just part of what happens. But I'm curious, because of all this thought that you've given about the human element, and also caring deeply about the mathematical and the scientific elements and all the knowledge and data that you have, from where you are now, like what are a handful of things that you would love to see happen in the industry or in your sphere of the industry to move it forward?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? I have my laptop open. It's now timed out. I haven't looked. You were right. I don't need it. And so I'll just do the ones that are alive in me, right? So better buildings are possible, right? And so what does that mean? Well, that means paying attention to the basics, which is start with a good enclosure, minimize indoor emissions, keep it dry, ventilate, and filtered. And those last ones, control humidity. That can be done through materiality and high grid buffering. That can be done through mechanical means. It can be done through both, which is a great, robust way to do it. There's ventilate. There's recognizing that you live immersed in air of your own making, many thousands of pounds inside your house, and you're taking 30 to 40 pounds of that air inside your house into your body, over the course of a day. Like it's happening right now with us, Like imagine a pint glass.
Yeah.
12 of those every minute. We are drinking this stuff, right? Or not drinking.
Don't think of it.
But the point is you're saying a handful of things, right? So it's recognizing the indoor environment as an impact on your health and well-being. And well-being, that's where you get to emotions. Well-being is an emotion, right? Health is a more like specific thing. I used to say crunchy, but I realize now crunchy means granola and hippies. To me, it meant fact-based.
Yeah.
So there's that. Like, I want people to know, and I want it to be broadly known across the society, that there are clear, known, and direct, though not experienced by you, impacts between the indoor environment and your health, right? So that's one. And then there are other sort of upgrades, which is like along the lines of the airbag in your car, right? You have an airbag in your car. it increases your well-being, right? It makes you feel safer, and appropriately so. You are actually safer. You don't want to use your airbag, right? You know, you're glad it's there. In a very similar way, we're electrifying society right now. The global economy is inexorably moving off of fossil fuels toward electrical energy, right? And that can be generated with renewables, sun and wind. And when I say that inexorably, like, that's what human society has done since we started picking grubs out from under rocks, right? That was fat, that was energy, that was hunter-gatherer. Then we transitioned to agrarian society, another energy transition. Then we transitioned to the fossil fuel. Now we're transitioning to renewables. This is just what humanity does, and people have unfortunately politicized it. But the point, coming back to the point, is well-being with regard to energy and water, right? Well, let's say you live in Austin, Texas, and you know the grid isn't that stable, and you find out it's going to be 110, and there's concern of grid collapse, right? Well, you have solar panels and a battery, or you have a generator even. Even though you didn't use your solar panel and generator, the moment you heard the news, there might be a grid outage, your well-being was benefited, right? So don't ignore that, homeowners, right? You're doing everything you do for your home so that you have a high quality of life. And that means a high quality emotional experience of life. Similarly with water. Water is another freely arriving resource, right? When it rains, it rains. You can store that. I mean, people seem to forget, like, well, as long as I have electrons, I'm fine, right? Well, your body needs water. Your body needs food. Your body needs clean air, right? So those are a couple of things. Did you ask me to do 5?
Oh, I said a few.
Okay, so I should probably think of another one. So the question was things that I would like people to know about.
Yeah, as to help progress us in the way we think about building, especially.
Yeah, let me put it another
Please.
way. So let's say if you have a brother and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna set out to have a new home built for myself. What should I really be? What is the one thing I should really be focused on?
The air control layer. Yeah, good. Thank you, Kevin. You got me right there. Yeah, absolutely. To make the indoor environment what it is, what it needs to be to make you have well-being, well, it needs to be separated from the outdoor environment in a consistent manner. Robust, reliably, consistently separated. And that's, these older homes, that's what they didn't have, right? Independent of energy, they didn't have a consistent separation. So we didn't experience loss of well-being, even though we had what we would consider today, like let's say in the 1920s, right? They didn't have the thermal comfort we do. And yet you get people today that complain about the thermal comfort. If, it's not 68 in their house in the summer, when it's 100 out or something, right? And so there's another thing that's shifted, right? It's like the Princess and the Pea kind of thing. Like, we're very sensitive now. And and so the air control layer is super important. And generally speaking, it's as though we say the practices that are done most broadly across an industry, those must be the right ones.
Right.
And those are the ones that resonate with consumer society and
marketing, right?
Yeah, covetousness, marketing, economics. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But when you said control the air, just for those that are listening that aren't in our world, what did you mean by that? Oh,
so the air control layer, it's this fictitious group of different materials that takes this. Well, let's start with saying that 14 cubic feet of air weighs a pound, right? So a dorm refrigerator for a college student, that volume is a pound of air. So now take that into your living room. Your living room weighs 800 pounds. Your bedroom weighs 400 pounds, right? So the house is filled with this compressible fluid, but a fluid nonetheless, and you live immersed in it, and then chemicals in it go through your skin. It definitely goes into your blood through your alveolar sacs at the lungs. So the point is that air is really important. That was a long way to say that.
Okay.
And so you're living in this indoor swimming pool, and meanwhile, there's fluid outside, right? Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to say, I want that fluid outside to come in. Why? Because what am I doing in my swimming pool? Well, I'm breathing, sneezing, coughing, cooking, cleaning. My dog is shaking, my vacuum cleaner is, I am doing all sorts of things that emit known pollutants, right? These are allergens, inflammagens, toxins, as we talked about, right? These are known bad guys. And so you can't just filter them all out, right? We flush toilets. We don't just filter the poop out, right? And so, but there are people that would really say, I think it's better to and filtration is really important because it's the how the pollutant gets into you is often through the particles in the air. But the point is that you want to bring that outside air mass, which is generally cleaner, wildfires excluded, into the home in a known, predictable location at known volumes, and you want to filter it, temper it, take the heat out, the humidity out, right? So yeah, air is really important.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you for elaborating.
Love
Oh,
that.
for sure.
That's great.
Yeah. I like to say that it's controlling the air. It's controlling what's coming in and controlling what's going out. Right?
Just like our bodies, right? I mean, not that you need to biomimicry your house, but yeah, look, I got 2 nostrils and a mouth. That's where the air is. It's not coming through my ears.
Right.
And if you
Exactly.
puncture along, it's not a good thing.
Yeah. Although the chemicals through the blood, they diffuse in, through the skin, that like nicotine patch, right? That's a little different. It's like, well, that's not air, but it was what was in the air landing on your skin and diffusing through. That's also interesting, right?
Yeah.
Whoa, I'm very porous.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You think about that and like,
That's why not to have those candles.
right. Exactly. Or when we expose ourselves to like water that's dirty and stuff like that, it just soaks right in.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And that's actually another really important sort of impactful. And just real quick on the side here, right? So talking to someone and watching their expressions and learning what lands, learning what hits over the years is so useful.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that landed, and I've probably been saying this 3-4 years, is when you eat, your body says, oh, thank you for this material. I will separate nutrients from waste, and I will take the nutrients and use them, and I will push the waste out. Not when we breathe, right? So when we breathe, there's this just very clear, like just recognition that all your body expects is clean air. That's how it's set up. It is set up for clean air. Now, granted, there are sinus tissues with cilia in it that are there to hit the big
Gross
particles.
ones.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is an interesting concept there. Really,
Yeah,
when
and
think
for you
about
guys, right? I'm sure you have it. Like, well, when we say this, we get clients nodding. Like modeling now, you're never going to say model without saying, I don't mean a physical
it.
model.
You're exactly right. We do say that now all the time, just because of that one situation. And it's funny, and it plays into the scenario where when we say a term or something that it might mean something very different to us than it does to somebody else that doesn't have the years of experience in the industry. And that was a great example of it. Or it might mean something very different, right? Just based on what they've experienced. And so we put a lot of effort into trying to simplify our messaging to where it's digestible by most people.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
to the best of our ability. Because
Yeah.
there's still going to be some that get past the goalie, if you know what I mean.
Information flow, like this podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
This is what it's about. And actually, I thought of the third thing. So so I got 4 now. It was air control layer, indoor air quality, and then resilient energy and water. But there's a 5th one now, and it's the trades. Even the general contractors, right? Like our society needs to respect them more. Generally speaking, we have this sort of megalomania, and we want our kids to like all become tech CEOs,
Right.
work in glass towers downtown, or actually work from home or whatever. But we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need air conditioning contractors. These are difficult jobs. These are uncomfortable jobs. These are incredibly complex jobs, increasingly so.
Right.
And yet we treat them like the consolation career for, our kids. And, this moves into, the whole other areas of our society. I don't want to sprawl out the podcast, but,
Yeah, but no, you're right. I mean, because it's funny how sometimes, you'll get people that will be like, gosh, a plumber charges that much? What the heck? And it's like, yeah, they do an important job. And why shouldn't they get compensated for it?
Yeah.
Just like you get compensated when you go to work.
yeah.
And you get compensated based on the value you produce. And same thing with these.
Do you
guys.
value clean water?
Right. Exactly. When you flush the toilet, do you want it to work? Yeah.
Yeah, see, we don't. We think of our health. We think we have a healthcare industry, really, but it's more like a sick care industry.
Yeah.
It is.
And so, if there's a healthcare industry, it's our homes, right? Like,
Right.
and that just sounded a little like a little marketing term. But if you
No,
think
I'm
about
writing
it,
down,
if
actually.
you think about it, right? Like we're born with a genome, And then they have this, we know that there's something referred to as the exposome, which means basically you're born with a certain body and that'll determine your health, starting out. And then the rest of your health is determined by exposures, environmental exposures, right? Well, where are we spending our time? Mostly in our homes, right? So that means where are our environmental exposures? They're mostly in our homes. And so you could think of like, my home is what is protecting my health, right? And then I go to the doctor when somehow I didn't protect it and I got sick. And just one more, like just to make sure this really sinks in, right? So if you imagine, or not even imagine, just think of those termite mounds in Africa that we all know are ventilated and they draw air in the bottom and pull it out the top. And so what happens is those termites could not exist in that environment without that physical structure.
Right.
So do you say the termite mound is part of the termite? Well, it's definitely part of its well-being. It's part of its life. It could not exist without it. So in a very similar way, the air in your bedroom could be considered, well, that's your pre-lung. That means your filter is your pre-lung, and that the dryness of it and the CO2 from the ventilation that's low and the PM 2.5 that's low. So this is actually, like, in my opinion, like clear thinking to say the environment inside my home is healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, in much the same way that the healthcare provider that we have, that my parents have under us, says, go to the gym and we will cover that, because that will cause you not to have to come into the system as often.
And food, we recognize food intakes are important.
We do, yeah. But I wonder when that healthcare provider is going to say, you need to hire this company to build your house.
Not on my list.
Health.
Yeah.
Right?
I would like that.
I would.
What if you had a PM 2.5 sensor in your house and your health insurance would go down if it was good?
Right, exactly.
And then again, you get into social justice issues, right? Where, people can't afford that.
Right, but I mean, come on. Like, you can apply that to all things, right? But you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah. The affluent early adopters, often, they had cell phones. They had airbags, right? And then it's become more common,
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the first HRV that I installed in my career wasn't for, somebody that couldn't afford it. It was somebody that could, and we did it wrong.
Didn't know until later.
Right. Didn't know until later. But, it's like it starts somewhere and works outward.
And look at the humility there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Appropriate humility, given that we're in such a complex environment. Who would have thought building homes? Who would have thought designing MEP and enclosures could be so hard? But so complicated and hard, right? Disheartening at times, joyous at times.
Yeah.
I think for me, and I bet for you, the people I get to work with, definitely the colleagues at Positive Energy and the architect teams, the builder teams, and even the clients, right? That's the magic, right? Over the years, net positive, those human interactions enrich your life.
Oh, they do for sure.
Yeah.
And then the other ones are just like little speed bumps that,
Yeah. And you got to, like, I actually get upset when people are unhappy with our performance. And what always helps now is to go, this will be water under the bridge, right? I'm faced with some decisions right now, and I trust myself to make them. And then if I have anxiety, well, that's just me expressing me. I'm an anxious person sometimes, and that's okay too. That will also be water under the bridge.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't have to yell at you because I know it's going to go away. Right.
So we are to the point of the 5 quick fire questions.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so you can give brief answers. Don't feel like you have to like really go crazy here, but, and we kind of already asked this, but I'm going to ask again anyway. As an industry, how do we do better? Like one thing.
Care more.
That's good.
Am I allowed to say one thing?
Yeah, but you can say second if you want. I mean, like, it's kind of like the Outback Steakhouse. No rules.
Like,
is right.
we need to recognize that industries are always in transition and stop resisting that.
Yeah, I agree with that. That the transitional thing is important because there's no like right answer for every question always every time. It depends.
Right, like spray foam, right? So spray foam in my wall, not a bad thing. Spray foam in Cancer Alley in Louisiana, it's a bad thing, right? Spray foam in the landfill where it never gets turned back into dirt, bad thing, right? So we got to stop evaluating our materials just in our point of use. We need to say, where did it come from? Where is it going?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Let's care more.
Yeah, I agree. What advice would you give a beloved family member before starting the design build process?
My goodness. Be humble. Expect it to be harder than you think. And then my 3 favorite words, I guess: smaller, better, home.
Nice.
Yeah, we subscribe to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any value in a 7,000 square foot apartment grade
Right.
sick syndrome home.
You want an ACH of close to 1. You want to filter dry and control humidity, right?
Yep.
You want good thermal control. You want relatively simple roof lines. There's just all these things that are so not expensive.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Is there a person or persons that had the most impact on the direction of your career?
Well, this career, a guy named Brett Dillon, he taught my ResNet Raider class and asked me to help start teaching with him. And if you want to learn something, teach it.
Yeah.
And that pulled me out of my career as a builder. And prior to that, I had a career as a high energy physicist, which got into me deeply. What does this thing do? You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't, thank you, Brett. I haven't thanked you publicly before.
Well, there you
And
go.
the whole
Thank you.
ResNet
Thank you,
technical committee and all that. They were just
Yeah.
tremendous people, full of caring and hard work. And yeah.
Wonderful. What is something that most people don't know about you?
I love wind sports. I love windsurfing. I love kite surfing. I'm learning to wing foil. I just drove in today. I'm in Portland. I just drove in from the gorge. It was nuke and windy. And I was like, no offense, you guys, but oh, God, that's what I want to do. But that's okay. I have other meetings and I'll go back. But yeah, I love wind sports. I love it just stops my mind. It should be out there on the water. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Lovely.
What is your opinion, or what in your opinion is the single most dangerous thing that the construction industry currently does?
Well, I think I'd have to bifurcate the answer. It doesn't think about upstream and downstream impacts on the environment, right? So the environment, the more technical way to refer to it is the geobiosphere, right? It's this layer of molecules that are sucked to the planet by gravity, and it goes down into the Earth's crust a little bit and tops of the mountains. That's where we all live. We are the bio and geobiosphere. And if we're doing things that are degrading that ecosystem, that's degrading our lives. So that's one. So we got to stop doing that. We need to think upstream and downstream. And in a very similar way, we need to think about the indoor environment as a health intervention. Every indoor environment impacts your health. You want the one you live in the most to impact it positively. And so I would the question again was, should we stop doing?
No, what's the most dangerous thing?
Yeah, the dangerous thing is not thinking about impacts that occur gradually over long time periods. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the way you've introduced the concept of the home being part of your health routine.
Yeah, you brush your teeth, you filter your air.
Right.
Right. If you bought organic spinach recently and you haven't checked your air filter, well, bonk yourself on your forehead with the heel of your hand, right? Oops.
Right. and along that thinking, I think that when people start to have chronic illness or feel poorly or whatever, that one of the first things they should look at is their home environment first and foremost, before something I ate or whatever.
Or along with maybe, but yeah.
Right.
Food is very important. Exercise is very important. Your home environment is very important. And I think generally speaking, people don't recognize that third one.
They don't, not at all. The first two, maybe. You always hear people say, I should exercise more, or I should eat better. You hear that all the time. When was the last time you heard somebody say, ooh, I should get a healthy home?
Are my ducts leaking?
Right.
In fact, we haven't talked about duct leakage, but actually not going to go to duct leakage. You want tight ducts, airtight ducts. I have a family. I have a big family, lots of cousins and nephews and nieces and aunts and uncles, and they all know what I do. And they get around me during the holidays, and I just get to oh shit, here's Kristof going off, and and they're home. They're like, my home's fine. This is a bunch of crazy talk, right? And it's really a koan, right? Because it's a both and, right? Your home is fine. It might not be affecting your health negatively, or it might be affecting your health negatively in such a subtle way that you're still just carrying on.
Sure.
And the things I am saying about what makes homes better are also true.
Right. Yeah.
And you have to think any true statement often has some conditions in which it's true. And the health impacts, like, let's say cooking, PM 2.5 emissions, right? Bacon. And, why do you smell bacon around the house, right? Because it's got a high vapor pressure and it goes everywhere quickly. And it means it's in your blood quickly too, or in your lungs at least. But the point is, what was the point? The point is that there's truth to the fact that there's things you can't perceive that do affect your health, but in large populations. If you took 100,000 people and you didn't expose many of them to acrolein from bacon and you exposed some, right, you start to see the impact. So I can't say, you, Cousin Bill, are, you're a bacon lover and it's impacting your health and making you inflamed, right? So yeah. I think it's a very personal kind of koan or riddle for me during times talking to family, like, the last thing I want to do is make you afraid of your house.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because I get a similar scenario. Like, we don't want this jackwagon coming to my house because he's going to see all the things that are wrong with it.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to not say anything.
Yeah.
For the most part, unless somebody asks me.
Yep. Me too. Yeah. And it brings up the mold thing. Mold's probably everywhere in everyone's house. And might not be affecting. Was that 4 of the 5 questions?
That was
Boy,
5.
I'm braced for impact.
That was
Good.
good.
That's yay.
Yeah, you got through it.
Yeah.
Great. And so we use that just to try and, take little snippets of and put it out in social media to get people to watch the whole.
Oh, super cool.
Deal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And this is my first video podcast. Hello, video. This is the part of me that reflects light.
We love having you on the podcast, Kristof. It's fun because we came with some questions, but we deviated.
We didn't
from those
answer.
questions.
No,
Yeah.
pretty much
Right.
not.
I had notes on this laptop.
Right,
that I
exactly.
didn't use.
But that's part of the joy of it. And I think the thing that endures for me as we talk multiple times with you is driving back in the human element to everything we're doing. Yes, all these other things are critical parts of it, but there's some research about things as simple as if you go to a doctor's office and the doctor leads with, "Hello, how are you feeling today?" and shows empathy and wants to know you, people get healthier faster than when a doctor doesn't do that thing. So everything is tempered in the human environment. And so it's such a joy to be able to talk with you about technical things, but also the human elements of what we're doing, and recognize that we're never going to arrive at that destination, but we're walking on a path together, and we love to do that, like partnering with people like you. So talking about it is just a delight.
Yay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Thank you,
Paul.
Thank you, Kristof, for coming.
Thank you for joining us on our episode today. We had a lot of fun talking with our guests. We really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll be looking forward to you when our next content comes out.